Today we have Sana Khalid from Minerva, and Sana has been a very active member of the startup ecosystem in Pakistan. You have an amazing journey, and you've been a mentor to young people in Pakistan, especially with the program that you've built for Minerva. So I would love to hear more about that from you.
So the journey's been too long now. I don't know how to sort of sum it up into,
Sure.
but it's been almost 14 years since I've been working. 11 of those years have been with Minerva. And some part of it the past couple of years, 3.5 years to be precise, I was also working at the Hive. Minerva is a leadership development, personal branding and recruitment firm. We basically look after the people business, whatever falls under it. So whether it's talent placement, whether it's leadership development, whether it's skill building, whether it's mentorship, coaching, whatever the case might be, we do all of that. We have a very significant focus throughout these years has been on building talent. So the program that you mentioned, it started initially as a volunteer program for us, because we started as something very different from what we are today. And we would be running these programs that were not meant for profits. They were just sort of social programs. So we started with a volunteer program, and then we realized that, all these kids that are coming to us, they could use a lot of skill development. So we converted it into something which was similar to an internship program, but more of like a lot of training. So they would learn on the job. We had a panel of mentors and trainers who would come for workshops. There was a lot of one-on-one coaching. There was a lot of guidance. Networking opportunities, connecting them to people, so on and so forth. And so far, around, I think, at least 300 people have graduated from that program. Wow. And they're all doing amazing stuff. And I keep telling those guys, like, I keep stalking you guys, and I'm like on the sidelines cheering whenever they do something amazing. So
about an idea that you started building, or how did this even start?
It was really an accident, like a pleasant accident maybe, but
the happy accidents.
Chartered accountancy while you're also doing job is extremely difficult, because audit firms are tough places to be. At least they were back, like late hours, early mornings, a lot of work. And I enjoyed it, but after like doing it for 3 years, I realized that I wanted a break and just sort of complete my chartered accountancy, give my exams, and then get back to a job, because doing both together was getting very exhausting. So I came back on a sabbatical and I took a 1-year leave. So I came back to Pakistan, and I think within the first 10 days or 14 days, something like that, I could see that there were all these, my friends were graduating, but they couldn't find jobs. And I was like,
it's that stage, where either you have friends having kids or they're getting married, and, or, they're getting jobs. So it's always those phases.
Yeah. And I could see that so many people were struggling with jobs. And I was like, maybe we need a space where we could talk more about it. Like there are a lot of people who are getting degrees, but they're not really learning anything, and they don't have the skills that are required for the market. Within 10 days or 14 days of my sabbatical, I had rented out this place. And now when I think about it, it was extremely stupid. So I do not recommend this to anybody. Please think it through. And, there was a lot of naivety. It started out more as a tuition center, but with the objective of, actual learning and not just getting a good grade. Obviously, that marketing didn't work. When we said, we're not talking about grades, we're saying you're going to learn. Parents were like, and maybe they weren't wrong, because technically jobs were based on what your CGPA was, your college applications were based on what your results in ONA levels. So I guess they weren't wrong there, but I wasn't prepared for that kind of response. And I didn't know that, because I lived a very independent life. I always thought that this would be the student's decision. I didn't realize that it was not their decision. It was their parents' decision to decide where they went for tuition, right? And so that failed miserably, but because I had to pay the rent and the salaries and all of that, we had to pivot, and we started doing these workshops. So we started doing creative workshops. We're like, okay, if we can't do something around education, maybe we can do something around extracurricular activities with the same intention, right? So we did anything and everything that could help us sort of survive, which included, like, we gave out Minerva ki space for dholkis and like birthday parties and like
right. I never knew that.
Some
Amazing.
of my interns, they still recall whenever there was this birthday party and we said, okay, we'll do the decor for you guys. So they did a lot of events because of that. Like it was good. It was good fun. We continuously just had to pivot and learn, and like it was a lot of stupidity. I can't even begin to explain how naive I was. So when I look at kids now doing their businesses and
Mhm.
startups, I feel like I was really dumb when I started. But
If you
these
were
kids
to
know
start
better.
Minerva now, like how different would that be?
I probably might not because now I know better. Like I know.
But what are the skills that you think kids were focusing mostly on in Minerva? Because I'm assuming, like, even if it's the dole keys or the birthday parties, right?
Yeah.
Event management is a skill, and it
Yeah.
comes with networking. How are you handling other people's requests? How are you prioritizing and then delivering and then executing and then also, analyzing what you did is actually right or wrong? Like at least like a 5-step process. And throughout those steps, you actually learn a lot about yourself, about other people, about the process as well. So
Yeah.
even managing a dole key, I feel like teaches you a lot. It really does.
Yeah.
But in
Yeah.
terms of skill building, I would really want to hear more about, what you think, like how has that shifted or pivoted, if it
Yeah.
has, throughout these years?
It definitely has shifted, but I think something that I learned very early on, or I realized very early on, was that, technical skills, we focus too much on technical skills, right? And technical skills can be learned on the job. They're easy. You'll figure them out. There were always a lot of opportunities to learn technical skills.
Mm-hmm.
But our focus from the very beginning was on things that, because when I was hiring for Minerva, I was looking at what people couldn't explain what they did, or why they were there, or introduce themselves, have a conversation with each other, or there were all of those
Yep.
challenges, or write an email. I mean, it
Yep.
was just basic things. What subject do you write when you send out an email? Our focus was always on soft skill building. Our focus was always on exploration. So when people came to Minerva, we tried, even if they chose a department, first, initially, we didn't ask them to choose a department. But if they did choose a department, we made sure that they still got to do other things.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like it's very unfair that we're sort of forced into choosing a specialization at an age when we haven't tried anything. How can I know what I want to specialize in if I haven't tried other?
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot of soft skill development. How do you communicate with people? How do you have difficult conversations? How do you how do you stand up for yourself, without being offensive?
Yep.
All of those, and how can you become more visible? And this was that entire skill building took us to the personal branding
Mhm.
product,
Yeah.
where we realized that everything that we were technically teaching people was helping them become more visible for the right reasons. And so that's also how we got into personal branding and helping people develop their personal brands. um, but yes, it's definitely shifted. It's shifted in a lot of different ways. I think one thing that hasn't changed, and one skill, or maybe not skill but attitude, that I think everybody still needs and needs more of, is that of exploration, and sort of being open to learning new things, and
Mhm.
you know sort of relearning, unlearning, being open to accepting different opinions, like all of these things. Emotional intelligence, now we have a word. But just knowing how to communicate with people. I think this entire shift that we've had to remote, I feel like we're really missing out. Like one thing that
Mhm.
I tell a lot of the younger people who come to me, I my general advice generally is to not try and not opt for a remote job if it's possible for you
Right.
to go and have
Mhm.
that physical experience, because there was so much people learned on the job by looking at other people, by communicating with them, which I feel like they're just missing out on, simply because they're working in at home. They don't have that conversations because it's another meeting. It becomes another
That
meeting.
is
It
very
becomes
true.
another Zoom call, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
But what do
so
you
yeah,
think are the main skills that people in their 20s should be focusing on? People
yeah,
just coming out of colleges and universities don't really know where to start, looking for a job. Again, like you said,
yeah,
sending an email is like a tedious task because you haven't done it before.
yeah,
Apart from emailing your professors, and that too is just sending assignments, back and forth.
yeah,
It's not even a proper email conversation that you have.
yeah,
So talking to external stakeholders, is very
yeah,
different at a workplace than what you've experienced in a university or a high school.
yeah.
So what do you think are the main skills that people should be focusing on in their 20s?
I think if we club it all, one for sure is patience. I think we're always in a rush. We make every, like the most important decisions of our life, like specialization, our first job, first internship. These are extremely important decisions. And we make them in a rush because we feel like we have a timeline to follow, right? So one, I think patience.
Mhm.
Two, I think having um, sort of owning or taking responsibility, which I feel is a skill, because I feel like it's a muscle that you have to sort of build in
Yeah.
yourself,
Mhm.
of taking ownership of the mistakes that you make and being okay with those mistakes. We can't get a job because the job market is such, we didn't do well because the teacher was such. But I think if you get into that kind of mindset, you sort of lose control over what you can do for yourself. So I feel like, having that, knowing that, okay, yes, there could be things that are unfair, there could be other
Mhm.
people that have more privilege, but at the end of the day, you're responsible for yourself and nobody else is going to come and save you, right? Being open to learning, I think people now, I guess, there is more open to exploration. If we maybe went back 5 years or 10 years,
Mhm.
if you've chosen a degree, you have to have it, right? Like you have to go through that entire thing.
Yeah.
You can't drop it in between. And I think, again, that's very unfair. So I think being open to exploration, um, if people can learn to empathize, if they can learn to understand other people, if they can be more open about understanding people rather than reacting to what people are saying, or I feel like if you can learn the people component,
Yep.
I think so much can be solved. Like so many problems can be solved. Like people have issues with their bosses or the people
Right.
that they're leading, or their employers or
Mhm.
their interviewer. I think if we can just communicate effectively, a lot of those problems can be solved.
But then in terms of communication, right? It's a very big topic. How would someone even start building a communication skill set? Like, would it come from networking? And if it does come from networking, then how does someone even start networking or finding like-minded people?
Hmm. I think now it's so easy.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, imagine, like if I was to imagine going back like 12 years or 14 years or 20 years,
Yep.
when social media was not this popular or maybe didn't exist, imagine what networking was like then, right? You
True.
actually had to go and
Yeah.
speak to somebody, which I can understand is very
Mhm.
awkward, right? It has always been awkward for me as well. And it's
Mhm.
something that I've gotten comfortable over time after a lot of practice, because I just always had to be in that position where I had to speak to people and reach out and so on. So I think one, networking now has become really easy. If you have somebody on your LinkedIn or your Facebook profile, you see them so often and they see you so often. Like
Mhm.
if you're just commenting or liking their pictures or liking their posts or commenting once in a while or something like that, you're visible to them to the extent that it's almost like you know each other, right? So the next time you randomly come across somebody at an event, it'll be like, oh, I know this person.
Yeah.
And it's so much easier to just have that conversation because you both feel like, yeah, we know each other a little bit. So it's okay to say hello. It's not like I'm just randomly
Yeah.
going and saying hello to somebody, right? So
Wow.
I feel like networking is very, very easy
Mhm.
now. Access to people is extremely easy now. You can reach out to anybody in the world as long
Mhm.
as they're on LinkedIn or Facebook, and the chances are you'll hear back. How do you build better communication? Like, so obviously, you've already mentioned that the communication skills is not one skill.
Mhm.
There are multiple skills that make your communication effective. So listening skills, right? Speaking skills, understanding people emotions, so emotional intelligence, and so on and so forth. I think there's no way to learn networking or communication than to actually do it. So putting yourself in that situation. I remember even to date, actually, I get extremely nervous and anxious if I have to go and talk on stage. Putting yourself in that situation
Mhm.
consciously. And two, I think also, like, I think the most uncomfortable part of any conversation when it comes to networking is introducing yourself, because most of the time,
Oh my God, yes. Yeah.
most of the time we're not confident about who we are or what we do. So we start off with, my name is Sana, and then by the end of the sentence, I feel like I just want to bury myself and not complete that sentence, because you feel like maybe I'm just saying things that the other person's not interested in. So I think a little bit of practice actually does help, because usually we don't practice our introductions, right? We're like, we have to talk about ourselves. Why do we need practice? But I think it does help to know what you want to focus on when you're talking to somebody, when you're introducing yourself. What do you want to talk about? Maybe you can just talk about, if you're just graduating, you can just talk about you're just sort of in the middle of your last year or whatever, you're about to graduate and you're looking for these jobs and you're exploring at this point. I mean, it's a starting point. If you are confident, the more confident you are about your introduction, the chances are the more interested the person listening to you will be. If you're not confident and you're like all over the place, the other person's also thinking, how do I take this forward? And they start to do. So I think a lot of practice, just saying things over and over again, also makes you comfortable about them, right? Like they just become matter.
Considering that you've also recently started, I think, a podcast about how, about your life in your 30s, I would love to know, how have your goals shifted, or how have you changed as a person from your 20s to your 30s? Later, we'll probably catch up again. For now, this is like the decade that I'm talking about.
I think my entire life has been an experiment, and I've enjoyed every bit of that experiment.
I love that.
And one thing that I'm very grateful for is that even after 14 years of working, I'm still as curious as I was, and still as open to experimenting as I was so many years ago, right? Of course, there's more fear, because again, like I said, I know everything that can go wrong, or most of what can go wrong. As far as goals are concerned, I think I have my goals have shifted so much, because I wanted to do so much, and I could never just stick to just one thing. And I think that's why Minerva sort of stuck around, because I was not answerable to anybody to sort of stick with one program. It has its downsides. Not sticking to one thing has its downsides, for sure. Because then you can't build something big, right? You can do a lot of small things, but I think now this is and it's funny because you mentioned the podcast as well. My first episode was about lack of clarity and sort of not feeling fulfilled and not knowing what I wanted to do, and so on and so forth. And almost a week after that podcast, in fact, while I was recording that podcast and then listening to it, I think I've never had more clarity in my life.
Wow.
And I was talking to one of my, in fact, ex-interns, and I was telling her, I was like, it's very funny because I can no longer relate to that podcast. What was I talking about? Right? What not? And I now have that clarity and I'm okay. But I think throughout my life, I knew that I wanted to do something big, and I wanted to make an impact, and I wanted to do lots of different things, and I didn't want to stick to any one thing. But what those things were kept changing throughout. Back then, it always felt like, I was just doing these random things that didn't make sense. But in hindsight, I know that the one thing that still connected all those experiences was how much I enjoy working with people.
Yeah.
And helping them. Too many times we've thought about, me, my friends, my husband, who we're all at almost the same stages in our careers. And we kept thinking about, we set a goal, we achieve it, but then there's always another goal. And like, it feels like
a constant.
And it's true for a lot of us, like the people. And again, this is something that I tell all the young minions that come to me.
Yeah.
That you feel like you look at people and you feel like their lives are sorted.
Yes.
But I know a lot of my friends are extremely successful. You would look at them and you would think like, if I wanted like an ideal situation in my life, what that ideal situation would be, this is it, right?
Yeah.
But I know them personally, and I know that they're equally insecure,
Mhm.
equally anxious, equally unsure of what they want to do next in life, equally sort of they feel like they haven't done enough. And again, that podcast came from all those conversations
Yep.
that I had had with people where we were saying the same thing.
Mhm.
And we couldn't figure that if this wasn't success, if achieving every goal wasn't success, then what was? So
Wow.
I think my life has been an experiment. I've shifted what I wanted to do, when I wanted to do, how I wanted to do, all the time. I think now, for the very first time, like I said, I feel like I know what I want to do next, and that feels enough. Like that, no, I don't want to know what's going to be the next after that. I'm okay with doing whatever I've decided for myself. And I don't know why that shift has happened, but I think it's just that I was spending a lot of time just thinking about it, just sort of introspecting. And I do that almost twice a year, because twice a year I have an existential crisis, just like a lot of other people. But this time it feels like I think I'm okay. I'm doing fine.
What should people in their 20s invest their time in?
Experiences.
And what should they invest their money in?
Experiences.
And what
Can I
should they invest their energy in?
I think just lots of different experiences. That would be.
That's very true. No, but thank you so much for this. I really enjoyed having this conversation.
Thanks, Sanya. It was lovely talking to you.